Hello again, friends! Welcome back. My name is Oscar Montes Iga, and we're at the Booze Library here of Uncork Vintage Academia. Thank you for joining me again, and today I bring you something quite special, at least in a sense, to help you keep celebrating. I hope you've had a great 4th of July weekend in general and festivities on Monday, 4th of July, and so on. I hope it's been safe. But we've celebrated Independence Day in the United States, and that may be scratching your head. So, what are we talking about today? I think today most people internationally, as well as maybe domestically here stateside in the United States, the question is, what is the most American spirit that we have? And that is a tricky question because some people, maybe most people, may recognize bourbon as the iconic American spirit, definitely recognizable across the world, and for several reasons. One, that it is protected. It is a geographical protected indicator that has been basically both approved and passed by Congress and definitely by design in some international treaties that protects bourbon as distinctly an American product from the United States, and it can be made in any of the 50 states. But bourbon, to me, it's really a style of whiskey. And yeah, of course, it's style, and it is a protected style of whiskey. But, it doesn't really tell us much about how really what's behind the label, right? Because even within bourbon, there's many different profiles and expressions that the distillers may choose to showcase. So, what I bring you today instead is, a more traditional, down to earth, the beginnings of whiskey in general in the United States. And again, that's also going to be a conflicting story because when we had migrations from Europe, a lot of those craft distillers that were living in the edge of civilization in the colonies back then, or even escaping European taxes and so on. They brought distilling traditions with them, and they started distilling a grain that was available that they were familiar with, which was rye. So a lot of early colonies, especially around Pennsylvania and New York, they had rye whiskey to begin with. But when you further dissect the real origins of what we should be distilling, that is also widely available, but it wasn't really as recognizable to a lot of those immigrants, was corn. And corn still basically the base of bourbon, but we don't consider bourbon a corn whiskey. That's bourbon because it's made in a certain style, in a certain a way, and within the United States, of course. And yes, you can make corn whiskey anywhere around the world. There is also beautiful Mexican whiskey being released into the market with ancestral corn varieties that's never been, manipulated by a lab, versus a lot of corn whiskey in the United States that can be GMO sort of corn. With some exceptions. And of course, there's craft boutique distillers in the United States using heirloom corn varieties, so to speak, to make their corn whiskey. But, what I'm trying to say really is that when you look at corn whiskey, that should be sort of an iconic American spirit. And, maybe picking nails. I'm not necessarily only talking about specifically the United States, but because corn is native to all of the Americas is really, or could potentially grab corn whiskey as a distinct product from, the corn varieties that they grow locally in their own autochthonous regions, but really grab corn whiskey as their own local identity as a spirit. Some people might, some people will not, just possibly because they have already all their spirit traditions. And just to throw it out there, just for example, In Peru, we have a tradition of pisco, a distilled wine from grapes, so we call it brandy in other parts of the world as well, but we have pisco coming from a Peruvian tradition. And even though they also grow corn, and I'm sure somebody will make corn whiskey in Peru, they may not necessarily reflect as a national identity of a spirit, like corn whiskey versus what something they already had, like pisco peruano. With that said, talking about brandy, what I bring you today is actually a corn whiskey, and a United States American corn whiskey that was aged and finished in peach brandy barrels. So very unique profile. This is from Georgia. The producer is Ivy Mountain Distillery. It's giving us Appalachian corn as a source, as a raw material. So corn whiskey, corn material from the Appalachian Mountains. It sits at 50% ABV, and this was aged a little over 4 years. And the distillery itself, Ivy Mountain Distillery, also produced a peach brandy. And again, brandy is basically a distilled wine. So first, they obviously made peach wine, and that wine got distilled into a peach brandy. And so they aged that peach brandy in barrels. Once they removed that brandy, they put corn whiskey into those barrels, and we got this masterpiece. It's a limited edition batch. This is batch 582, bottle number 141. Unfortunately, it doesn't tell us of how many bottles, so we don't know necessarily the output of those however many barrels. I assume it's more than one barrel that they made, but it's still a limited supply kind of issue. And that's really all we have. I don't really have a lot more information about what else Ivy Mountain Distillery may make as far as other spirits go. But when I saw these on the shelf, and I do tend to like some corn whiskey, as I said, corn whiskey aged in peach brandy. It's a unicorn. Let's just give it a shot, right? So I'm excited to share with you. And also, if you're familiar with my channel, I also love brandy, so why not give it a go? So the spirit is clear, and we're tasting neat, of course. The color is a medium gold amber. There's really intense tonality of this hue that leans towards gold and amber, and then the spirit has a transition, a canary edge with a very pale transition towards the further edge, the outer edge. My initial nasal impact is drying. There is a lot of drying sensation on the nose. And the nose is menthol, peppercorn, ginger, marzipan, peanuts, banana, mango, peaches, apricots, nectarines, oranges, walnut, pecan, pine cones, butterscotch, and caramel, as well as popcorn. So caramel popcorn as well, and honey. And there's also quite pungent, more pungent than ginger, almost like wasabi, but I really don't have a better word for it yet. The only thing that's kind of reminding me is that wasabi character. But I'm sure the more eventually when I revisit, it's gonna give me a different name eventually. But there's a lot going on. What I'm getting from the raw material, the corn is, again, the caramel, the popcorn, the butterscotch, the menthol. Maybe a little bit of the honey, but also, the peach brandy barrel is giving me those fruity aromatics, the peaches, the mangoes, the bananas, the oranges. So adequate towards complex for the production intensity. I do smell corn. The aroma of élevage or aging or maturation is powerful and complex. There's a lot more going on in maturation than production. The length is average, and its character is, it's not mundane. It is ordinary, but leaning towards fine. There is some excitement, something that makes me wanna revisit over and over, even though it's not necessarily evolving. It's not really changing, but it's unique. It's exciting, and it's distinct. So it is towards fine. See what it tastes? So my primary mouthfeel effect is astringency. There is a lot of alcohol and acidity that makes this spirit astringent, with some highlights of warming more than coating. There's definitely more warming than coating, but the primary effect is astringency, and not necessarily in a bad way. It's still balanced with everything else that I'm going to talk about. But that is its primary feature. It's not aggressive. It's just really letting you know that it's there, kind of grabbing your gum line and your palate, saying, "Hey, hey, hey, I'm here." Astringent. The alcohol and glycerol are smooth. The body is definitely medium full body, and the alcohol is generous going down. There's a little bit that warming really kind of picks up. It's not rough. It's not hot. It's just really generous. The primary taste is actually between sour or combined sourness with piquancy. It's piquant. There is a lot of spice that is not really explainable. It is a combination of black pepper, ginger, and wasabi. As far as the mouthfeel effect, not necessarily the flavors, but the mouthfeel effect of piquant is there, as well as sourness and a little bit of highlights of salt, a little bit of highlights of bitterness. And it's got a smooth, buttery taste overall. It's got a buttery mouthfeel as well. On the palate, it's a little more simple. It's not as complex as the nose, but the aromas do come through from the butterscotch, the popcorn, the caramel, the orange. The orange becomes a little bit more like burnt orange, but there's also a little bit of peach and pecan, and peppercorn. So both, I can still taste the corn and I can still taste maturation in brandy, peach brandy barrels. The flavor intensity is concentrated, but again, not complex. It's really simple, but concentrated, meaning it lets me know that the flavors are present distinctly. They're not faded flavors. Flavors are strong, but they're simple. They're not complex. With that said, the balance is bold, and by that I mean, again, the astringency grabs you. It's present, is predominant, but it works with the body of the spirit, with a medium full body, the buttery smoothness that coats your mouth. So everything's working together, but it has a boldness, a little bit of tension that really stands out. And my overall impression is very good. Nothing wrong with this brandy. Whiskey, corn whiskey aged in brandy. Are there other corn whiskeys out there that I do love more? There are. I love other corn whiskeys, and I also love brandies. But this is fine example. I don't know what I would pair this with. This is a stumper as far as pairings. But foie gras or terrine may work. Um, Maybe summer sausages. I think summer sausage may be a good pairing. But so cold meats, forced meats. I think they're decent pairs for this. I don't really want anything sweet with this whiskey. It really doesn't have enough sweetness to hold up to anything sweet that I would think of, even though it's highlighting some fruit character. So nothing really sweet that I want, but some savory, easy meats, nothing complicated. Again, we're having a simple profile versus something complex, and you want to match those. You don't want one necessarily to overweight the other, or be overwhelming to each other. So there you have it. We have Ivy Mountain distilling corn whiskey, putting into a brandy peach barrel. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you've learned something new. I hope you've subscribed and share with your friends. We're gonna have a lot more coming up, but I do wish you happy 4th of July and a whole Independence celebration month. And stay tuned for our next video, which we're gonna go across the seas and feature something just as fun. Possibly a cocktail, and very likely a cocktail. So again, thanks for watching, friends. I look forward to reading your comments. Cheers.